We're incredibly lucky to be joined by Ria Patel on our final interview of the day. Ria is a Green Party councillor in Croydon and is also the Green Party of England and Wales' spokesperson on equality and diversity. We're going to be talking about transphobia throughout the next 15 to 20 minutes. But before we do that, just wanted to say a massive welcome to Ria and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. I feel privileged to be here.
Great stuff. So we've got loads of questions already lined up in the chat for you. But before we do that, I've got a few questions of my own just to kind of set some of the context for the discussion. So on the last episode of Bright Green Live, we talked to Guy Ingerson about the Scottish Green Party's position on the Green Party, the transphobia in the Green Party of England and Wales. In the last two interviews I've done on this show with Maggie Chapman and with Natalie Bennett, this question of transphobia came up from the chat as something people wanted answers on. I wonder if you could talk us through how big of an issue you think transphobia in the Green Party is.
Yeah, so I think that honestly, the majority of members probably haven't heard the issues that have been ongoing. I think that we have really strong policies on trans issues and queer issues more broadly, but it is an issue because it is affecting queer people. I won't deny that transphobia isn't an issue within the party. I think that there is a smaller number of people who have those views, but they're quite a loud vocal minority. But as I was saying, it is an issue because it is affecting the kind of well-being of trans people within the party, but also kind of the perspective of the party outside. So on social media, also on the doorstep, rarely, but sometimes it comes up. And I've spoken to some people, both in kind of Scotland where it's come up because of England and Wales, but also within England and Wales. So overall, a smaller issue, but definitely affecting individuals.
One of the recent developments around this has been that the Scottish Green Party voted to suspend its ties to the Green Party of England and Wales over allegations of transphobia. How did you feel when you heard the news that they'd voted that way?
Yeah, so I was aware that this vote was going to happen. I'd been having conversations with the Rainbow Greens about it prior to it happening. And honestly, I just felt really sad. I'm a member of the Scottish Greens, as well as England and Wales. And so it was quite sad to see that kind of the ties being suspended. And I think, although I was sad, I understand why they've done it. And I understand why they did decide to vote to suspend their ties, because it was becoming an issue for the Scottish Greens, because the way that the Green Party of England and Wales was being perceived was impacting upon the Scottish Greens perception, because although we're not kind of exactly the same party, there's definitely mirrors between the two in terms of policies. I think a lot of members would have felt quite sad. And I think even Scottish members rightfully kind of felt angry and upset about it as well, and some of them would be members of the Green Party of England and Wales, and so there's still that relationship there. But it's sad to see the ties being suspended, and hopefully, if the situation does improve, we can reignite that relationship again. And it's not to say that the conversations aren't going to happen between the two different parties, and work can't still kind of go on, I guess.
You said there about potential for the situation to change in the Green Party. What do you think needs to happen within the Green Party to start to tackle the issue of transphobia?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I won't deny that it's a big issue, and so it will need a kind of a wide range of solutions. It's not going to be kind of a one-size-fits-all type of solution to the situation. So I will talk through a few things that I think that are ongoing. So, for example, LGBTIQA Greens is putting together some guidance on queerphobia to be presented to GPLC, which is the Green Party Regional Council, to adopt by a kind of a framework that was passed, I think a year back now, at conference. And so this would be guidance as to what queerphobia is, but also the kind of the subsections within queerphobia. So homophobia, lesbophobia, things like transphobia, all of these different things, kind of just to be explained and give some examples as to what this might look like, because I think it's important to have guidance to be able to identify these types of situations, and also for people to reflect on their own behaviour, really. Another thing that's LGBTIQA Greens have introduced over the last year is inclusion workshops for local and regional parties. And so these have been actually really popular, I think, for the people who have attended them, and I've got some good feedback from that. And that's something I'll be continuing to do in terms of my role now as Liberation Officer for the LGBTIQA Greens. And so we visited lots of different local parties across England, and hopefully we'll be reaching out to Wales too soon. But it's kind of a space for people to kind of have a bit more of a discussion around these issues, because it can be quite challenging to understand quite complex dialogues and have discussions with queer people themselves if you don't know anyone that is queer and if you don't know anyone that is trans. And so it's not just specifically focusing on trans rights or transphobia, it's a kind of more of a holistic workshop on queer issues generally, how a bit of history, a bit of terminology, and then a bit on trans rights and transphobia, and then a section for Q&A. And so people can really get that type of that space that's a safer space and closed environment, so it's not being recorded and things like that, to be able to ask questions that maybe they might be a bit more afraid to ask in a public space. I also think another thing that could be kind of improved is the disciplinary process and the complaint system more generally, and that's just not just for queer rights or transphobia, but the process itself, I think, needs to be developed and improved for all sorts of issues, and maybe taking a more victim-centered approach might aid that. And finally, I'd just say engaging with global Green parties and also the European Greens. So, for example, we've been engaging as LGBTIQA Greens with the Gender and Queer Network, I think that's the name of it, within the European Green Party, who are hoping to bring together lots of different voices from across Europe in terms of queer rights and women's rights, and tackling issues around both of them collaboratively, and learning from each other's experiences is quite important when doing that, so that we don't make the same mistakes across Europe.
Steve C has said that most of the candidates for leader of the Green Party in the last leadership election were asked about how they would deal with transphobia in the party. But Steve says that, apologies, losing my voice after this long day. Steve says that this appears to have gone quite quiet recently, at least publicly, and asks how can we get the leadership to take the issue of transphobia on head on. And similarly, Finn White has asked what you think that the Green Party leadership could be doing better on transphobia.
Okay, yeah. So I think that we had several candidates saying like that they would like to stand up for trans rights and would champion this going forward. And I wouldn't say that that hasn't happened within the leadership team. They've definitely been pulling a lot of weight behind the scenes. And I think that they have been engaging and doing things like they had an open discussion with LGBTIQA Greens members. They've had conversations with myself and Seb, who were former co-chairs of LGBTIQA Greens. So behind the scenes, things are going and kind of slowly, but they are very open to receiving kind of suggestions and criticism as well. But I do think that publicly, potentially, it's just a challenging role to be a leader, but maybe we need a bit more leadership in terms of a bit more constant reassurance in that things are getting done, and we are focused, and that trans rights is a priority, really. I'm not the person to kind of dictate what they should and shouldn't be doing. I think that they should definitely maybe reach out again. I know they reached out to all of the liberation groups originally when they were first elected as the co-leaders, and with Amelia Womack as well, who was the previous deputy leader. They had discussions with all of the liberation groups, or at least the offer was there. But maybe now that some of the liberation groups have had their AGMs and had a handover, it might be worth reaching out again to all of them to see to give an update as to what's happened, not just on trans rights, but liberation issues across the board. To give an update on what's happened and kind of next steps going forward and what else we need to do moving onwards. I think also one thing that's been a challenge is fighting, and one thing that LGBTIQA Greens, Greens of Colour, a lot of the liberation groups has been suggesting is having a paid person that is there to do kind of as an admin assistant for all of the liberation groups and do some of that groundwork behind the scenes, because it is a lot of work. People underestimate how much work it is that goes into running the liberation groups. And if we had some administrative support, I think we'd be able to achieve a lot more across all of the liberation groups, to be perfectly honest. I know that the leadership did propose this last time that the budgets were being set on the GPEX of the Green Party executive, who make the decisions about the budget, but that wasn't taken forward. And so I would encourage again the leadership this time to put that on the table and other GPEX members to support this, because I think if we want social justice to be a priority, then we need to fund it adequately. And our policies are awesome, but within the Green Party, we also need to make sure we're following that. So, yeah.
So I'm going to take a couple more questions from the chat before I let you go. The first of which is about the Diverse Matters report. And for people watching who may not be aware, the Diverse Matters report was an independent report that was commissioned by the Green Party and written up by a organisation that specialises in issues around equality and diversity. And it looked at the Green Party's progress on issues around equalities, diversity, liberation, and so on. Not just with regards to LGBT rights, but on the whole spectrum of diversity. And Meg S. Foster has asked whether you have any updates on the Diverse Matters report and what, if any, actions were recommended with regards to transphobia.
Right. So I don't have any update on the Diverse Matters report. We had the first, so all of the co-chairs of the liberation groups were invited to a working group to put forward kind of and develop an action plan coming out of the Diverse Matters report. And we were told that it would be a long process, and we want to make sure that it's done in an adequate way and everything is that was advised by the report is taken on board and reflected on properly and put into action. But I don't necessarily have an update. We had the first meeting a few months ago before the new GPEX officers were in place, and so we're still waiting for the new officers or whoever is leading on this work now to reach out to all of the liberation groups, and I'm not sure what the status is, unfortunately.
Not at all, not expecting you to know the internal machinations around that necessarily. So the final question I've got from the chat that I wanted to put to you was Steve C has asked, as an outside observer, it seems the policy that the Greens have to think the best of each other paralyzes any method to deal with transphobia. How can that process be changed? Yeah,
so I think there is ongoing work. I will be honest, and I will say that I'm not sure on the finite kind of the details of it, but there is some work around the code of conduct, I think, around GPRC, looking into it and doing some kind of reviews. And yeah, it can definitely get in the way. I recognise that. And yeah, I think GPRC might have recognised that as well and might be looking to change some of the way that it's worded, not to remove the kind of principles within the Green Party, but making sure that it can't, the way that phrasing is worded can't be abused.
And finally, just a final question from me then, really to kind of close things off. I think this question around transphobia in the Green Party, I think, has rumbled on for a number of years now. I've certainly got quite tired of spending a lot of my time talking about it. It's an issue that comes up in every leadership election. It's an issue that is recurring at conference. The issue of trans rights is something that there's a small group of people have been consistently trying to bring policy to change the party's policy on. There's a group of people who have been, at every leadership hustings will ask a question on this issue. There's, I think, within the membership and within our wider support base as a party, I feel like there's been a lot of trust and faith given that this is an issue that will be sorted out. And that trust and faith has been given to the leadership, it's been given to the disciplinary process, it's been given to the Green Party Regional Council. And I think there's a degree to which that trust is wearing thin. after a number of years of this issue not being tackled, and there's demands for certain people to be kicked out of the party for transphobia. There's demands for a kind of wider approach to tackling it. Why do you think people should have trust and faith in the party's ability to tackle this issue?
I'm not here to convince people to stay and fight it off if it's impacting their mental well-being, to be perfectly honest. I think it's important for people to prioritize that. But I will say that people should continue to have faith within the party, because we do have really, really strong policies on our trans rights and queer issues. Honestly, I think we're the most radical and forward-thinking out of all of the political parties. And we have things like self-determination as one of our policies, which I was really proud to have been a part of passing. And I do think that work is ongoing, but I recognise that it may not look publicly like that. I think it's really difficult, especially for people like the leaders, to be able to manage that perception versus kind of what they are able to actually say and give away in terms of the work that's ongoing. But work is ongoing, and I won't deny that it's going to still take time. It's a massive issue. I think we're moving in the right direction slowly, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way, and we don't want to rush things to like leave loopholes and be in a situation where it's kind of we put a plaster over the issue rather than actually tackling the issue itself. I recognise that it's going to be really difficult though for trans people to continue to have faith within the party if it looks like it's not a lot of action is happening. And I really empathise with people who might be struggling. I know that people reach out to me, and I'm always happy to have a conversation about it. But I also want to say that there is a safer space within LGBTIQA Greens, and there is a bit of a community there. And I think that's a really lovely community that it's been wonderful to be a part of and see grow within the last 2 years or 3 years. And I think that community has kept me going when times can be a bit more challenging. I'll leave it as that.
Thank you so much, Ria, for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.